Hello everyone, and welcome to this final live episode of the Fair Food Forum event series. This one is What's Next for the Fair Food Story. Brighton and Hove has inspired this series with work that contributed to it becoming the first gold sustainable food place in the UK. At each event, we highlight people working with Brighton and Hove's community and social enterprise food sectors and discuss opportunities, challenges and solutions, and of course, connect you all. Please make use of the live chat to comment and ask questions. And again, on today's show, we will be asking, what next for the Fair Food Story? Before we meet everyone, we're going to play a short video from Brighton and Hove Food Partnership highlighting the impact and response to food issues caused by the pandemic and how people can help ensure this vital support continues.
The 23rd of March 2020, our phone lines started to ring. We all felt the panic as that first lockdown hit. Empty shelves, long queues, isolation, and of course there was the fear of the virus itself. But the realities hit particularly hard for many in our city who were left struggling with bare cupboards, many for the first time in their lives. So many people needed help, and we were there. In the first few weeks of lockdown, we received hundreds of phone calls, emails and requests for help. We heard from older and ill people anxious about how they could get their shopping delivered, and from parents at a loss as to how to feed their children without the free school meals they previously relied upon. Here at the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership, we already knew about food poverty. We've been at the centre of all things food related for over 15 years, working with and connecting food banks, businesses, community groups and others from all parts of the city, helping people to access healthy food, grow their own and learn to cook. In March 2020, we realised our city had to come together to ensure no one went hungry at home. And that's why we turned to you, Brighton and Hove residents who helped us in the past, as well as community groups, the public sector, restaurants and local businesses. We launched a fundraising campaign to meet the city's food needs. Our initial crowdfund target was £15,000. We could never have imagined that at the height of lockdown, we would spend that amount each week buying food and toiletries. This was possible because of donations from individuals, the local authority and others. A network of 45 food hubs, including food banks, meal projects and new hubs in churches, community halls, schools, a table tennis club and a pub, distributed food to up to 3,000 households each week. At the heart of this was an amazing team of volunteers who packed, checked and delivered every parcel in the most extraordinary array of vehicles. COVID-19 exposed many inequalities in our city, and the sad fact is they're not going away anytime soon. Brighton and Hove Food Partnership were here before the COVID-19 crisis, and we were able to help when the unexpected hit in 2020 because of your amazing support. We need to be here for whatever comes next. Please share this video and if you can, consider making a donation. Thank you to everyone in our city who helped in the last year.
Amazing. Welcome to Vic Borrill, Director at Brighton and Hove Food Partnership. Vic, tell us about the most important parts of your work.
Hi, Rebecca, and thank you. I guess the first thing I'm going to say is that video, which sort of looked back at the entire year, is not about a fair food system. It's actually about a response to failure. And so I think what's happened over the last year is the inequalities in our food system and the challenges of the food system have been really highlighted. I guess the most important part about what we do as an organisation, though, is about connections and networks. And these really came to the fore over the last few months, over the last 12 months, in fact, because we took a key role in coordinating the response, in helping the really small projects to actually do what they did best in communities. But we also had to step in and help because there was no way that surplus food or food banks or any of the previous elastoplasts that are there on the food system, we're going to be able to cope with the level of need.
Thanks so much, Vic. Thanks so much for that, Vic. Great point. We're now going to meet Iain Chambers from Brighton Food Factory. Iain, tell us about the work you've been doing during the pandemic and the part that Brighton Food Factory has played.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start by sort of just telling people briefly sort of who I am. I always think with these things, it is worth saying, well, why should we listen to this guy? Like, who is he? So I've worked for the Bevy community-owned pub, which is on a low-income estate in Brighton, in Morscombe. And from sort of 5 or 6 years working there, really saw up close what food inequality does, both from a sort of family and personal point of view, but also from a social point of view. And that led me to try and think of solutions, and Brighton Food Factory was the result of that. Initially, we were looking at sort of food inequality in terms of perhaps making pre-prepared meals and trying to find a way of making that happen within communities. And then COVID came along, and sort of two things happened. One, I realised that we were in a position to help, and Vic sort of asked for the Bevy and for the Food Factory to become part of the emergency food response. And also, I was really, it sort of changed the way I looked at things. So the very rapid community response, particularly around food and meal making, really sort of opened my eyes to, hey, you don't need to make pre-prepared meals for communities. Communities can do that for themselves, and they showed it so well in COVID. So we sort of pivoted very quickly and became a sort of local produce wholesaler, and we worked with Vic, and Vic used us to bring in particularly local fresh produce. So obviously the commercial market fell off a cliff and was closed down, and left a lot of growers in a very difficult position. They'd lost their buyers, but at the same time there's suddenly demand for produce. So the idea that we can support local producers through a difficult time, but also start the process of showing what amazing local produce there is, and trying to make sure that produce now and in the future is accessible to people regardless of their income. Because often at the moment that's a farmer's market, a quite high value thing, and I just think part of food inequality. So as Vic very rightly says, we're in a sort of sticking plaster reactive phase through COVID, and it's been incredible to be part of it and see what communities can do. But the only way we're not going to go through this over and over again is to look at the food system as a whole, nationally, globally, but yes, locally, we can make a difference. And what I feel the Food Factory is there for is to be a sort of a connector, both literally moving produce from farm to the customer, but also using my sort of background in community connection and connecting ideas together to try and look at sort of system thinking and system change.
Thanks very much, Iain. I'm really pleased now to welcome our next guest, Sayanti Banerjee from Brighton Cauldron. Sayanti, tell us about how Brighton Cauldron has changed its focus in response to the need for your services during the pandemic.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. My name is Sayanti Banerjee, and I'm a community development worker by profession and have been for years, working for a local charity, Trust for Developing Communities in Brighton. And my main area of work or specialism has been to support and work with Black and minority ethnic communities in Brighton. So with my experience of working with the community over the years, I mean, there clearly has been food shortage, food poverty, but it has also been supplemented by various other difficulties and complex needs that these communities face, like, you know, language barriers, cultural unfamiliarity with the system, poverty, unemployment, lack of just unequal distribution of resources, and lack of access. So when the COVID lockdown hit the city, and the community were again affected by various factors, additionally to what they were already going through, like, the free school meals stopped. There was a lot of social stigma of accessing a food bank. So they didn't know how to approach a food bank, and the whole concept of food bank is associated with a lot of social stigma within these communities. There was lack of ethnically diverse food as well. So the food that was available at the local food banks often didn't meet the needs of these communities. So Brighton Cauldron, which was essentially, we were a newly formed social enterprise, and our main idea was to work with Black and minority ethnic communities, provide training and do food projects. We quickly adapted to the changing circumstances, and we set up I think perhaps one of the first and few BME food banks or food hubs, like we like to call us, in Brighton. And this was around just nearly a year ago, so about May. And we saw that our referrals quickly started rising rapidly, week by week. I mean, now at the moment we are catering for about 100 individuals for the week, delivering ethnically diverse food. So yeah, I mean, at the moment we are a food hub running from West Dean, and we are delivering food to over 100 people in Brighton, and we do deliver food rather than collection. So that, again, I mean, I'm going to talk about that later, but that addresses a lot of factors and makes it much more accessible food hub for the Black and minority ethnic communities.
Thanks, Sayanti. That's a great introduction. I'd now like to welcome back Cherita Jones, Momma Cherri. Cherita, tell us about your work in West Brighton.
Hi, yes. Well, I'm working with the Purple People Food Bank every Friday. And what I do is, as you can see behind me, I've literally just collected loads of produce, fresh produce. So I get the fresh produce on a Friday morning, I bring it home, and then I get my inspiration. And my when I'm trying my best, my daughter climbing out, climbing across the room. What I try and do is turn this fresh food into meals, because I'm very conscious that a lot of people who attend these food banks, they get a lot of fresh foods and they just don't know what to do with it. You know, when you look at this celeriac, people will look at that and walk away. So what I do is I turn them into soups, into roasts, into curries, and try and show them how what you can do. And I'm also in the process now of writing what I call my food bank, feeding a community in a pandemic cookbook. So I'm taking inspiration from what we get from a food bank and showing how you can create good, healthy meals to make a difference in our community.
Thank you very much, Cherita. I'd now like to welcome Jo Wren. Tell us about your work and how the people you work with have been experiencing the benefits of community food and growing.
Hi there, Rebecca and everyone. I feel like something of an imposter in this, to be honest, because our project is not about food growing or food production or providing meals for people, but I am director and co-founder of a project called the Grow Project. Ironically, given the name, we're not about growing anything except maybe in human terms. So we're about using the power of nature in a therapeutic way. So growing well-being through nature connection and supporting people to improve and maintain their well-being through regular connection with nature in whatever form. I guess what we do is we connect or reconnect people through a range of different courses and stuff to the benefits of being out in nature. And we do that through a range of different activities, largely through sort of conservation work and shepherding or creative and mindful activities. But some of it is towards gardening and growing. And your question was, how some of the people that we work with have experienced the benefits of community food. I know that the people that we work with, who are people that have mental health challenges in Brighton and Hove, will have been affected by the pandemic because of the very nature of mental health. It's, there's a high proportion of representation of people that will be on low incomes, who probably will have benefited from some of the work that you've done. I guess what I would like to sort of look at or highlight is pointing people towards the possibility of food growing projects and flagging up the potential that food growing projects could well have in the recovery from the pandemic and the mental health and physical health of the population in general. And we know, I think we're gearing ourselves up to the fact that there is going to probably be a tsunami of mental health challenges in the city. And I think that nature, being outside, as we all have experienced in the last few months, has shown us that it can be incredibly valuable for mental health. And I think that there will be a real part to play for food growing projects in the recovery from all of this.
Thanks so much, Jo. And yeah, I think we're seeing that need already. Thanks very much, everyone. Welcome to you all. In this section, we're going to bring everyone back to discuss the themes that have come out of previous Fair Food Forum sessions. And the themes that have been highlighted are well-being, particularly around mental health, diversity and inclusion, and making sure that the people who are definitely not taking part are enabled to do so. And also financial sustainability, coming out of a time when there's been a bit of funding around to support the work that has been needed to feed people and keep people well. As we start moving towards the new normal, how, if some of these projects need to remain, which I think we would agree they do, how do they finance themselves? If you're watching this at home, do send us your comments and questions. During the pandemic, there's been an explosion of goodwill and examples of people coming together and collaborating for no other reason than to support their communities. I'd like to go to Cherita and ask what the risks are that things go back to how they were, and how do we keep hold and nurture the energy we've seen?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what we need to understand is that food banks and food insecurity was here before the pandemic. There just wasn't a spotlight shown on it. So now that spotlight is here, we've got to carry on, because within my heart, I'm not stopping just because they opened the doors. Because even though when we come out of lockdown, there's still going to be people sheltering, because not everyone will have had that vaccination yet. And there's still going to be young families who are in need. So we just have to make food banks not be this kind of thing that you don't talk about. We've got to keep all of this at the front of our conversations. And also for me, when I'm looking forward to things opening up so that I can now start going to local churches, local community groups, because before the pandemic, there used to be groups that would get together to feed the elderly, places where people could go and socialize and just have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and a biscuit. We need to get back to that community spirit. And I think one thing the pandemic has shown us is that we miss each other. And I think we're going to appreciate each other's company a whole lot more.
Thank you, Cherita. Let's bring everyone in. Do we have any more thoughts? Would anyone like to add anything?
Go on, Iain, speak. I know you got something to say.
Yeah, so like Cherita, I kind of it's very much about building on what's already there. Lots of great work existed before COVID, both in terms of the food partnership and working across the city and making connections, and then just within individual communities looking at their own needs. And food banks are part of that. But my belief is that, again, like Momma Cherri, that if we leave them as they are and they're growing in number, that's not necessarily a healthy thing to do. So that they're very established in America, and they sort of become a bit of an industry in their own right. And I think if we can encourage the kind of people who dedicate themselves to their food banks and give them the support to really create food hubs, and there's several new ones emerging in the city who are kind of really wanting to be food hubs, not kind of handout places. I don't think food banks are those things, but they're in danger of being so. And I think if we're not careful, those who are happy perhaps to ignore food inequality and ignore poverty, they're quite handy that they exist, because if people are literally starving in the streets, that I think would be a different take. So I just really believe that food hubs, one in every community, literally one in every neighborhood almost, is something that we can quite feasibly do. And COVID has accelerated it. So that's the kind of the upside of it, is COVID has accelerated and brought more people forward who can see food is just the ideal place to be together, connect. So you can eat, but you can also talk, and you can organise, and you can look after each other, and be there for each other as a community. So they're very exciting. Kind of, it's not how you want to do it. In other words, have a horrible pandemic that sort of is so difficult to live in. But on the other hand, we really did need to speed up. So climate change and many other things means we had to speed some of these processes up, because people are staying too long in poverty and too long in food poverty.
Thank you, Iain. Anyone else like to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I was also going to say I would like to see more projects in schools, like growing, getting young people gardening, and and if we can get schools, just getting people back to nature and learning how to grow their own food, and so that they recognize what a fresh vegetable is.
Yeah, absolutely. So there have been some huge benefits to people's mental health during a really challenging time through growing food and connecting with others around food and making meals together, a communal experience. During this Fair Food Forum series, we've recognised that these opportunities aren't accessible to everyone. Sayanti, you've been doing a lot of work in this area. Who's missing out, and how do we get them involved?
Sorry, Rebecca, I just missed that bit. Can you repeat, please?
Okay, so we'd noticed that not everyone has the opportunities to get involved in the amazing work that's been going on around growing food, connecting with others, making meals together. You've been doing a lot of work around this area, so we wondered if who's missing out and how do we get them involved?
Well, firstly, I'd just like to say that I completely agree with what was just said from Iain and Teresa, and just can't stress enough how the communities have come together in this time of crisis. So the positive thing that we've seen from the last year is that people are coming together, and this stigma that I keep talking about, I think somewhat we have taken a step forward to be able to break that. So people are coming together. There is increased self-confidence, and just people believing that communities connecting together and using their skills and strengths that they already have is really taking us further. So obviously, we are meeting the needs of people and food poverty. Obviously, the aim is to be able to live in a world where there will not be a need for food bank. So I think what we would like to do is, moving forward, involve as many stakeholders as we can to be able to understand their needs, to be able to use their skills and that they have, which was the main idea behind Brighton Cauldron. So that, and then because we have been able to connect with so many different people from different communities through this 1 year. I mean, that is what we would aim to do, to be able to involve them in various projects, to be able to give back training and create employment opportunities, and manage the financial uncertainty, the lack of income that has hit so many people and families in Brighton.
Thanks, Sayanti. Okay, so Steve's come in with a comment. What COVID has done is highlight the impact that collaboration on food poverty can have. Absolutely. Impact of the whole was much greater than each individual group. Yeah, and I think that speaks to Vic's point. Vic, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was going to agree, but also I was going to say that the impact of collaborating, because the thing is that why it's important that, all of the, that I know every single person on this screen, right? And that everybody who's working in the different areas can connect with each other is because actually sometimes what happens when you're so busy trying to respond to a need is that you never look up, right? And actually it's when you look up and you can make connections with each other that we'll have a more longer term sustainable option. The other thing I want to say is we do have one absolutely magic ingredient in this work, and that is food, right? Because whether we want to talk communities about from Brighton Cauldron about what people are doing or what we different areas, by sharing food and being able to share experiences, we immediately invite people in. And I think that's why when we can open up again and we can sit around tables and we can talk and we can enjoy our food together, this will potentially absolutely rocket, because at the moment it's all happening behind very closed doors and still loads is being achieved.
Absolutely, thank you for that, Vic.
Yeah.
Can I bring Charita in? Around who's missing, who needs to be more involved?
Well, I think the people that need to be more involved, I'd like to see my Black community more involved. And what I've been doing is I've been reaching out to individuals. Andrea! And I've got a really close friend of mine who works with me. And what I've been doing recently is I give her some of the food I have. And Andrea, get in here.
Sorry.
Tell them what you do. Tell them what you do.
Well, I work with the LGBTQ community, Cutie Pop. And that's, people of colour. They do like events every month, twice a month. And one of those events that I cater for, giving them just cooking a meal. They love Caribbean food, so that's my thing. I put spin on different things and give them a taste of something different. But it's just for the people of colour that feel that they're a little bit sort of missed out in society at the time. So they come together and put on different different clubs, book clubs, acting. We had a choir last week, for instance. So it's a lot of different things. So they're getting themselves sort of out there, sharing what they do. But yeah, they love the food and they're very grateful for getting the the donations.
Yeah. And one thing I'd like to say is that within the group of all of us, I am so happy of the connections that I have made, because from being involved with the food partnership group, and just everybody, we've got our little WhatsApp group, and if we've got surplus of anything, we mention it, and then it's there for the taking. And it has just shown me and opened my eyes to a community who give. And I was raised that way, that if you give, you be guaranteed somebody's going to give back to you. And that's what it's about. Last week, I picked up a fridge free of charge because someone said, I've got a spare fridge. Does anyone need it? I needed more fridge space so that I could cook double the amount that I'm doing, and I'm doing that. So, if I've got anything extra, I put it in the chat and say, anybody need it? If someone has anything extra, they put it in the chat. And I've seen from this, we're all sharing together, because I don't like no waste. So if I've got something that's too much, I'd rather give it away than throw it away. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you, Charita. Does anyone have anything to add around? Inclusion? How we can bring more various people in? Joe.
Yes. I think one of the things that we're all going to have to be aware of, I mean, I totally get the points that people have made so far about, how people will be desperate to get out there and do things in the community and get involved with communal experiences. One of the things that I'm certainly becoming quite aware of is the fact that there is also a real sense of nervousness and anxiety amongst some people, especially those that have got mental health challenges, to going out into the world again. And I think we need to be especially sensitive and really think about actually how we can ease people's transition into communal experiences again, because I think there's going to be quite a bit of anxiety amongst a lot of people about getting involved in things again.
Thank you, Jo. Iain.
Yeah, I would agree. So working at the Bevy, as soon as COVID hit, obviously we closed down our 2 social lunches, largely attended by older people who obviously were shielding, and we're in discussions with those people now about how they might like to come back in, if you like. And obviously the first month at Bevy is outdoors, but then we do worry about, well, if people don't want to come indoors, you then have what was once a sort of single group all together around the table together, perhaps kind of split up. So it is a real challenge. We've put in some heated cabins outside to kind of give people somewhere to sit. I think we'll probably have running special sessions when the body's not open, in order to allow people to come in and feel that they're in the safest environment they can be. But yeah, it's a challenge.
Thank you, Iain. Thank you. A question from Steve. Is anyone working with rough sleepers? Well, Steve, in our first food forum, we talked about the work of one of the big homelessness charities and how they're working with rough sleepers. Is any of the panelists doing work with rough sleepers? Not as yet, but I know that many of the organisations, the homelessness charities in Brighton, have been connected with the Food Partnership and are working to make sure that people are fed.
And I think that there was a sort of statutory element that the council were able to sort of have specific funding, specific focus. I think what I'm hoping for going forward is the council can kind of see from the last year that community projects should be directly involved in things like procurement, in some of these food answers, and rather than come up with all dancing schemes, it's much better to start at the grassroots and build up. And if you do that, then hopefully you're also going to hear from working class people, homeless people, and give them a direct say, rather than, as sometimes happens in the past, is these rather thoughtless and certainly exclusive schemes that tend to run out of steam a little bit.
Thanks, Iain. We just had a comment from Seamus about using schools, clustering schools, and using them as a basis for community as a starter. That's a suggestion directed at you, Iain, and I know that the Bevy's been working with one of the, if not 2 of the schools locally. How's that been?
I do think that I think anybody who's interested in working with schools should start probably with the viewpoint of schools are really run off their feet. So particularly with COVID and the recovery from that, but in general, the curriculum, the demands on leadership teams and the staff as a whole it is a lot. So I know there's quite a few, for example, guys have gone into schools and have often fallen by the wayside because it takes work. It takes constant work all year round to kind of put effort in. There isn't always the time to do that. So I think definitely if you want to work through schools, be prepared to bring your resources to the table. So yeah, we work with the Bevy, we work with North Coombe School, and we kind of really try and start with, well, what do they want and what do they need? But they've got a really great attitude around outdoor learning and cooperation with the community and with partners. not all schools are like that. So I think you have to be prepared for your school maybe to think, no, we've got time for that. Our priorities elsewhere. On the other hand, if you can get it going, and particularly if a school really does have the right kind of spaces where you can really make something happen, it does bring amazing things. I mean, certainly at Moulsecoombe School, they've had a sort of long-term run at this, and they've just come up with remarkable things. You walk around the grounds and see, grapes growing just by the playground, things like that. So I think it's definitely something trying, but it would have to be long term. It would have to be well thought out, and try and get lots of people on board to help you, because otherwise it can become a bit of an onerous task keeping a garden going.
Thank you, Iain. Thank you. So I wanted to come back to you, Iain, and ask you a question. The work of the community food sector has been well supported with funding and public donations because we've been in an emergency. Once we return to the new normal, if these services need to remain, how are they going to sustain themselves financially? Now, I'll come to Iain, but I'd like you all to have a response to that if you have one. Iain, should we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a really good example of this is something that the Food Partnership have been helping create. Is there's an affordable pilot, and so you've got new entrants, if you like, into the community food situation, and because those groups have come together, and so they have, at the moment, Zoom meetings, so they're aware of what each other are doing, they're learning from each other. They're learning from being part of a pilot, and they're learning, from what the Food Partnership bring in terms of experiences, what's happened before, how councils can react, issues around findings, community spaces. So instead of having to start at zero, you've got people who are immediately peer learning. They see themselves doing it. So you've got working class communities, estate communities. And it's a bit unusual to go into a sort of new thing and find that actually there's people like me here. That's an amazing kind of form of encouragement and confidence giving. So I would say that it's important to, I always think it's important to try and be part of something bigger. It doesn't mean you have to be taken over by it, and you can certainly plough your own furrow if you know what you're doing. But it's really great to sort of realise that you can actually go, oh, we'll cover this area, and you cover that. That's literally happened in this food pilot. In terms of the sustainability, some of it I think is up to like at a higher level. So it's at council and government level that you need to lobby and say, this is a form of organisation that can find the answers that people are looking for, but they don't necessarily have to have structures upon them. Just let them do it, but allow them into a process instead of sometimes sort of flattening another idea. So there's a sort of responsibility of, I think, people like me, and I'm sure Vic would think the same, is that's kind of our job, is to look after some of the infrastructure and the collaboration and the connection that allows the communities to really focus on what they're doing. And then in terms of money, I think sometimes communities can figure it out for themselves. That if you make modest meals, you in a modest way, and they're modest, but they're affordable, but they're healthy, they're freshly made, it's as good as cooking it yourself. Then people can afford that, and it can sustain itself. It might need a little bit of seeding, it might need a little bit of, say, some equipment or help securing a space. But in the large part, I think people can look after themselves. So to me, it's a combination of, yes, get people to understand how some of the bigger, sort of big spending and buying equipment or securing a property for the sort of overarching projects. But then the other side is, yeah, let communities do it, and then figure out ways for people who have got money to support people who have got less money. So I think we're calling it sort of solidarity shopping, or just being aware that just by shopping with your local community food project and paying the price that you can afford, you are probably making it possible for someone who can't afford those full prices, or maybe can't afford a price at all, to take part in the same thing. And that breeds solidarity, and that breeds community and gets people to see each other's lives. And so you then start talking about, you know, inclusion and not exclusion, people getting to know each other, understanding each other's challenges, but also common humanity.
Thank you, Iain. I'd like to go to Vic. If thank you, Vic. If it's, I was going to say, if it's quiet enough there.
It's all right. My upstairs neighbour keeps switching noise on and off, so we're all right. Go on.
Right for the moment. I just wanted to bring you in because I know that the Food Partnership's done some incredible work with the Affordable Food Hubs project, and has supported some of the existing and emerging food hubs. And my work with UnLtd has been benefited by some of those food hubs becoming social enterprises, and UnLtd being able to support them to develop their sustainable business model, hopefully into the future. So could you tell us a little bit about the work there, the food hubs?
Yes, so these, Iain touched on it, these are models where people will usually pay a small membership fee to join in order to be able to get fresh local produce. It costs are kept low by it being seasonal products, and they also, for people who can't afford things at all, are getting sort of fair share or Gleaning Network surplus. So it's kind of looking slightly different at trying to offer some choice, but you know, there is a sliding scale membership fee. All of them will do a free parcel if somebody's in absolute need, but the idea is it's for people who have got an ongoing issue accessing affordable food. They're very new. I mean, at the moment we've been sort of piloting six across the city, and I guess the things I would say in terms of what needs to really help next is actually, in order for them to work, I mean, we've talked about the local authority, but there are all the other big anchor organisations like the universities and schools. You know, premises is a big thing. So it's like church, faith groups have premises, community buildings have premises. Like being able to run these things is something that kind of almost needs some space to happen in, because the actual running of them, I do think that, you know, if you can pay £1 to come and have your meal, that's great, because that £1 then perhaps will pay for the things that you need to buy together. So it's a real learning experience. We've been doing it for the last 6 months or so, and we now are going to be doing it for the next year, continue to try and support these projects, share the learning. We'd love to open 2 more as part of our pilot scheme. So particularly interested in the west of the city, because we've sort of got a bit more of a cluster in the east at the moment. But that's how it works in a nutshell. I'd also just say, I think that there is going to be a big problem with resources for food projects in the next sort of year or so, because there has been a lot of grant funding around. We reckon we've given about £150,000 direct to small groups in the last 12 months, which has been passed on, which we were used as a conduit. So again, what Iain was saying earlier about making it as quick as possible for the small groups to be able to get on with what they need, which means that we have been doing like the funding reports and the funding applications behind the scene, just being able to pass the money on.
Thanks, Vic. That's insightful and great to hear that project carries on. I've been working with a couple of those people, and it's really inspiring. Does anyone else want to come in around the question about remaining financially sustainable once this huge amount of financial resource that's come in during the pandemic is dried up?
I will.
All right, well, let's have Sayanti first, and then we'll come to you.
Okay.
Lisa.
Thank you, Rebecca. I mean, 2 things. The partnership work has been incredible. So being able to connect with various organizations and groups across the city and just exchanging resources has really made things sustainable for us. For example, we have continually worked with 2 local nurseries in Westdean and being able to exchange donations to be able to cater to our needs. A lot of value in the local assets, community buildings, assets, and local skills of volunteers and stakeholders, which we have made use of effectively, and really that has helped us go a long way. And what we are definitely planning to do long term is stick to our original model of having the social enterprise and aiming to use the skills and expertise of BEMA community members, train them, and then set up our own business of doing ethnically diverse food and selling it at a fair price, so that we can make ourselves sustainable based on that. So on the one hand, we would be providing training. On the other hand, we would be selling our produce to make ourselves sustainable, thereby creating employment opportunities at the same time.
Thank you, Sayanti. And Sharita, you wanted to come in.
I mean, one of the things that I'm doing now that once the pubs reopen, I am going to be approaching a lot of pubs to see if they want some kind of like one-off events and outside catering type things and setting up some soul food nights. And I'm like the Temptation say, I ain't too proud to beg. And I shall be begging to get the help that I need. So I'll be doing that old-fashioned put pot on the table and ask for donations. So while I'm feeding people, I'm asking people, if you can afford to buy a meal from me, and you can afford to donate a pound to feed someone else. And that's what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to be reaching out to try and keep catering, but every catering job I do, I'm asking for a donation for my homeless, for my food bank project.
Thanks, Charita. Did anyone else want to come in on the financial sustainability?
I mean, I think go ahead, Joe.
I really have nothing massive to add, other than the point. I think this, financial sustainability for all of us is always an issue, isn't it? On the one hand, we've been sort of lucky over the last year, haven't we? That that there has been sort of money out there for pandemic, response to pandemic, and it concerns me, I have to say, about how things are going to be going forward. And I think it's a mixture of everything that everyone is talking about at the moment, sort of mix of sliding scales and charging and training, and we're having to be, all of us, quite innovative in what we're doing these days. Apart from running the amazing services that we all run, we're having to become entrepreneurs as well. But I guess that's the way forward, isn't it? That's the only way that we are going to be sustainable, is by mixing up what we do and not being totally reliant on government handouts, although some more of those would be really handy right now.
Thank you. Now we have a question about to arrive on our screens. It's a question for Vic. Vic, I'd love to find out more about the process and the work behind setting up the affordable food hubs. I'm involved in a project in Wales and funding to pilot some food hubs, and it would be great to learn from the work that others have already done. Thank you, Angelina. I'm sure you get an enormous amount of these requests, Vic, but over to you.
I think in the time I have available, I probably can't go into detail with you, but if somebody just wants to drop my email address in the chat, I can't get into the other chat, sorry. I'm really happy to sort of just answer some specific questions. I'll have a phone call with you. It'll be easier.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Vic. We will do that. We'll pop your email address into the chat so that you can be in touch. Brighton and Hove Food Partnership have a fantastic website, so do go and have a look at everything that they're doing there.
And I will just say, we're just about to do a report 6 months into the pilots, which we will share on our website. So we'll put everything that we've done so far in there as well.
Okay, lovely. Iain, I'm just noticing your hand on the iPad.
I was just looking at the chat, but I think sort of in answer, looking at things as a whole, really is I think that kind of coming problem of we're not entirely sure, are we, about the emergence from the lockdowns and economically, whether there's a ticking time bomb of unemployment to come. It's hard to sort of see that it won't be, but I guess we won't really know until we see what happens to people spending as they come out. Will it peak or will it last? So I think that's what will affect unemployment, and therefore that's what's likely to affect the demand for food banks. But I think I agree with Joe, I think there'll just be a pretty steady, probably a bit higher than before, possibly a lot higher than before, demand for not just food banks, but well-being services. So all the things where if people are anxious and they're excluded and they feel isolated, I think that's likely to continue. I'm hoping that people like NHS Trust can see that they simply will not, in the same way that it was very difficult to deal with COVID, I think they'll find it's going to be so difficult to deal with the sort of well-being, the mental health crisis, that they've got to do something quite quickly. And I think one of the things like trust can do is they can move the super tanker, which is obviously very topical, quickly enough that they could quickly access what communities do. It's just whether they can figure it out. And I know locally there have been us that have been talking to us and to others about their well-being projects and how they can bring in community organisations. It's just, can we do it quick enough? Because they have, they do have money, they have resources, they certainly have the ability to kind of make large-scale changes. If they change their behaviour, that changes a lot of behaviour. So whether that is or whether it's just including the community in their use, and again, not coming with the we're in charge, but like, what can you bring us? Can we listen to you better about what you can do? So the Grow project is a perfect example of that, of how if they listen, they could see that small scale stuff can make a large scale difference.
Great, thanks for that, Iain. There we are, crop drop. How have you all approached engaging the public for support with your projects? I'm going to have to go to Vic again here, because there has been the most incredible response to your crowdfunding campaign or campaigns. Have there been two?
Yeah.
So tell us more briefly.
I suppose, again, the thing I'll say is the Food Partnership already has a lot of connections in the city, quite a high profile. We have about 7,000 people on our fortnightly news mailing list. We have a big social following, and we deliberately set out at the start to say that was one of the things we brought to the table. So by asking the public to support us and the projects we were working with, so quite a bit of the crowdfund money we passed on to other projects, it was a very deliberate way of using something that we already had to bring to the table, which was that we had really, really high public support. And I guess I think that all of the projects have benefited from engaging local people. I don't know about everybody else, but we had more volunteers than we could ever. That's my doorbell now. We had more volunteers than we could possibly manage in the spaces available. So we had people saving egg boxes for us. We had people who were driving for us. Everybody came forward trying to help in so many ways. So I guess the engagement is kind of across a range of things. It's financial, it was support. And now I think it's really important that we kind of capitalize on that to be about actually changing and campaigning on some of the issues. Issues around poverty and poor housing in our city are what are driving food bank use. And so hopefully we can use this sort of energy to campaign on issues as well.
Thank you, Vic. Has anyone anything to add there around public engagement?
I guess the only thing I'd add is if you are a small project and you're not sure about what works and what doesn't, just try and find some other small projects and ask them, because quite often, certain ones have been around a few years and basically have learned that unless you really get good at engagement, the chances are you may well struggle financially. So there's quite a few small organisations that have run crowdfunders. Betty ran a crowdfunder and absolutely smashed our targets, and we've still got some of the work to do from that because COVID's interrupted it. So ask around, and it's more likely that those small projects will just chat to you and kind of let you know that than others, people who might say, well, that's my job, I can't really give that information away. So yeah, ask other groups.
Thank you. So finally, we're coming to the end now, unfortunately. We've only got four minutes left of our time. So I'm going to ask you all to cast your minds forward to 5 years' time and ask you, what are the barriers that you've had to get out of the way? What have you had to overcome to be in the great place that you are in 5 years' time with your work? Huge question. Does anyone want to come in? You need some thinking time.
It's a hard one.
Go on, start us off, Iain. Keep it brief, please.
Yeah, so for me, it's just trying to, in terms of a system changes, the challenge is to come up with a really coherent, inclusive ideas we can make system change, and so that's going to require quite a lot of work to do that. But I think in the end, if that works, then I think there are funders, and there's even moves within government to kind of recognise that that it's a good way of achieving things. So local connection, local growers, local action. It's really on the agenda. It's not before, but I think in order to access that, you do have to present a good plan, and that's hard work. So that's the work that needs to be done.
Okay. Vic, what will you have overcome to be in a wonderful place in 5 years' time?
Okay, we will have cracked how we combine the community food sector, the public sector procurement, so I'm back to my anchor institutions, my universities and schools, how we can crack getting them direct buying off local producers so that we've actually shortened supply chains, we've got healthy food coming into the city, but it's for good. So it's like people are paid proper wages, it's like people working in the food industry are most likely to be experiencing food poverty. There's so many things there that are wrong. So I think it's about harnessing that kind of local network for buying food.
Fantastic and beautifully concise. Charita, did you want to come in?
Well, for me, I think big. I'm a dreamer. So in 5 years' time, I'd like to have myself a mobile van that I can drive into the community and say, food bank, step on up. And then just people can walk up to my van, collect their food and go, and then I can go to the next community. That's me.
Fabulous. Sayanti?
I would really like to see equal access to opportunities and resources. So everybody has equal access, really. That would be key, especially with the kind of work I have been doing over the years. I think that is something that is definitely lacking over the years, and we could really do with getting people the opportunities that they need.
Thanks. And Joe?
I think I would like to capitalise on the realisation that's grown over the last year of how important nature is for well-being, and really be able to harness that. And so I think my barrier will be just around getting governments to realise that nature and food growing and being outdoors should be part of what's funded in terms of public health.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Great vision. Really incredible work. So much food for thought here again. I just want to say thank you all for joining us today. I really enjoyed listening to the discussion on the panel, the comments from the people watching. I'd like to say a special thanks to our panel. Do look them up. Everyone has a website. Thanks to Vic Borrill from Brighton Hove Food Partnership, Iain Chambers from Brighton Food Factory and the Bevy, Sayanti Banerjee from Brighton Cauldron, Charita Jones, Momma Cherri's Soul Food, Spin It, Don't Bin It, and Wren from the Grow Project. Thank you all for being here today. This was sadly the final live stream of the Fair Food Forum series, but we do have a very final event on Zoom next on Friday, 9th of April, and we're going to explore this question further. We will pop a link up for you all, and also a link to the series blog, which has recordings of all the events that we've had so far. So that's all. I'd just like to say thank you very much. I'll see some of you soon, I'm sure. And I do, for everyone watching, please do look up our panelists and the work that they do. You're all incredible.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing us together.